Construction Coach here. Today, I'm going to show you post beams and joists for this beautiful deck. This deck is 15 feet by 32, and I'm really excited to show you the entire process. We've been working in this yard for a while now. Let's get started. I've got 9 piles on the project, and I chose not to cast my saddles right into the concrete. I'm using these bolt-on ones afterward because the other row that's going to hold the beam is quite a bit different in elevation, like about 6 feet down, so it was going to be really hard to make sure my saddles were cast. So I'm using these type where you put down with a sleeve anchor. I'm using a 1/2 inch by 5 inch sleeve anchor, dropping it down in, and then I'm just putting a little recess in the bottom of the post so that I can set over top and not interfere with the bolt. For lineup purposes, the center hole is center hole, so I'm just putting the saddles this way, but when I actually set the beam on, I'm going to turn them 90 degrees and tighten them down. Here I'm sliding on the 3-ply 2x10 16-foot beam. I already have my joist hangers installed. My goal here is to make sure that the deck is one step up at this corner off the concrete because the concrete is sloped out of level. And I feel that this will match the stairs that are right beside it. So what I'm doing is putting a line on there and then roughly leveling with blocks to get the beam on the bubble level how I like it. As you can see, I'm just a little bit out there. After I'm done, I will put the actual 6x6 posts in, but for leveling purposes, it's much easier just to use scrap blocks to get things where you need them. So I've re-leveled the beam and got it saying it's perfect. Now I'm going to work this other beam into it to make sure that I'm center bearing on the pile. So I'm going to have to put a 45-degree cut. When I'm cutting through thicker material, if I don't have my beam saw, I usually just run the line with the circular saw and finish through with the Sawzall. I was really happy with how all my joints turned out on this project. You'll see some close-ups in the future here of some really decent cuts that hit in perfect spots, and I was quite proud of how this structure went together. Alright, now that I've got the upper beam all straightened and leveled in, I now need to make sure that I can set the saddles for the posts down here the perfect distance away. So I've got my beam dry fit on the piles. Now I'm going to use a 2x4 my level, measure off the top of this beam and see where it hits, and then check it on the parallel side so that I can get a chalk line established to install the posts. Now that I've got a parallel measurement marked down on the piles, I'm going to go along and install the saddles on top of them. After drilling a 1-inch hole on the bottom of the posts so the nuts don't interfere in the saddles, I will install them into the saddles. All right, so I've got the front 6x6 posts installed. They're just sitting there loose. I'm gonna finish off by putting the hanger nails in the bottom and get them all lined up at the bottom so that when I plumb them up, they're nice and straight. It's looking really, really good. Once I get these kind of attached at the bottom and plumbed, then I'm gonna take some measurements off the deck to get the height to cut these all down. And I'll probably use my chainsaw and just do some nice accurate square cuts across the top. And then I'll be ready to set this beam on top of these posts. Now it's a little different here. I'm gonna be at working height. So normally you see me put the joist hangers on if it's really low. This is not a bad working height, so I'll put all the joist hangers up once the beams are up in place, and that I've got the ends all squared up. So, whew, long go for now, but once I get this beam set, and the beam on the side here, and the beam closing off the end, then I've just got to measure my joists, set the crowns up, and finish all the joists through this, and run my blocking, and that'll be it for another deck ready for decking.
Hey, pretty girl.
All right, let's get back to work. Before I can set anything on these posts, I need to brace them and set them plumb. So the first one there, I attached the base with a 2x4 and then plumbed it and attached the 2x4 to the post. Then I'm connecting a horizontal member and plumbing each post. Now that I've got my posts plumb, I'm setting 2x10s, two of them, on the outside edge of the larger square that's on the deck, and leveling those with my bubble level and using blocks to determine the perfect height.
All right, well, I've got these two joists in now, leveled in with the bubble level. That's good enough for today. When I get here early tomorrow in the earlier morning, it'll be dark. I can use my laser, check things out a little bit easier. For now though, I'll be making my cuts, figuring out my lines to cut these posts and get these beams set, but things are really starting to shape up nicely. When I check my line of sight off the joist here and line it up with the header or the beam and the other joist, it's looking right dialed in over on this corner. So I'm feeling really comfortable with this. I'll double check one more time, make some marks on these posts, and then do a line, chalk line all the way across, making sure that it's all perfectly straight. And then I'll cut these and get the beams on.
posts are cut, beams are on top. Now I'm going to measure this end piece and put the 3-ply beam on the end. Now that the beam's all secure, I'm going to work my joist hanger layout down the front beam and start to install my hangers. The way that I install hangers is I put my layout lines there, I square them down, I sight the one side on the line that I've put there and make sure that the saddle bottom corner is perfectly lined up with the bottom edge of the beam. Then I'll put a cut piece of wood that's joist material into the hanger, close it off onto it, and put the other side nails on, remove the block, and that's a finished hanger. Now, some people don't like that because they think that there's too much up and down with joist hangers, so the best way is to nail them in flush and then put the joist hangers on after. I've always done it this way where I line it up with the bottom. If my joist hanger is low and my joist doesn't make it to the top, I always have PL 400, which is an acceptable base for saddles, because in new home construction we always use PL 400 underneath the framing member in the saddle. So you can essentially use PL 400 to chair up your joist if you are low. So I always recommend putting the hangers on first, and if you do run into a critical problem where you're low, use PL 400 to build it up, and that is perfectly acceptable. Alright, all joist hangers on and all beams in place. The deck is super square and very parallel, front and back. That's very important. You definitely got to do a 3, 4, 5 on this corner, and double check all corners to make sure you got a square deck, because that really helps when you get to the decking. Here's a quick look from the bottom. Stay tuned, we have lots more content coming out on these timber stairs and this complete package. This cabin is such a nice cabin. Very, very lucky family living here. Look at how straight that front is. Nice. And the joints, as I was saying earlier, like that's a 45-degree joint on a triple ply beam. Joist hangers are looking all perfect. End of day one. Alright, I've got my joist hangers all on, both sides here. Everything's running nice and parallel. All my joists will be cut at the exact same length. I'll check for crown, insert those. Now I'm over here working on this 45-degree angle section. So I've got these 45, or I think they're 45-degree angle hangers. These are left side and that's right side. And I'm going to show you guys how I'll set up to find where to put these, which I'll just measure off of this one joist that's here to get a tick mark and put an X on. So I've got a couple started here, but I'll show you guys how I kind of get it spaced out, and then you'll see me do it on that side where I haven't done it yet. And then I square the line down, get these set. Then I'll sight measure what the distances are on these and pre-cut a bunch of my blocking. Again, I usually go with that 14 3/8 and custom cut on ends and areas where there's thicker sections. So should all kind of happen pretty quick today. I'll just get these hangers up and do some pre-cutting, and I'll do one camera set probably from the top there, showing the whole installation of all the joists into their hangers. I'll tighten those up with some screws at the start, run my 3 rows of blocking through the whole system, which I think is just the way to strengthen up any floor system or deck. Don't spare on the blocking. You can see all the cutoffs I'm getting from the job. Sometimes people in a deck like this will run 2 rows, but I mean, and then they will throw away a half-ton truckload of cutoffs that were larger than 14 3/8. So don't mess around. Just cut the blocks on your saw. It's so fast, and install the extra row. It will really make a difference in the end. I also recommend these these 3-ply beams around the whole perimeter. It's the first time I've done that, even on the very end joist, and sure makes it a lot more solid. Like, a lot of guys are just putting one in there and then putting some backing in to catch their decking to do picture framing. I've got 3 there, so I've already got my backing in for picture framing, but I've got a really solid, strong member over there. Same with this jet out here. Because it's up in elevation, I wanted to beef it up a little bit and make sure it's much stronger. So anyways, let's get going with this layout, and then we'll get this thing all wrapped up today, ready for decking. So I'm just kind of running my tape parallel to the header board here and off the next one. But you know, I always do the back half the thickness and then put the X. When you're clipping on the edge, you gotta actually go right to the 16 and then mark the X. So see 64 and over. Make that line a little straighter. 64 and over, and then whoop. Make sure you're running parallel again. And 80 over. All right, so you that are a little more observant, you can see that I marked 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines on that side. I only have 3 of those hangers. The hardware store out here is pretty hard. They don't really keep stock of everything, but I can still put the joist in, nail it up on the face there, and then get the joist hanger in afterwards. So that's what I'll do for today. And I got 1, 2, 3, 4, but I won't put one on there because it's got the support below. So let's get them on, square the lines down, and let's go. Let the dust clear on that. That was literally every last scrap of 2x10 I have, but that's exactly 63 pieces, 14 and a half, 3 at 10 and 5/8 to get at the start there. So I've got all my joists cut, got all my blocks cut. I did add one more ply to this front beam just to carry over the lap and get it tighter to the concrete here. So when I finish with my fascia, I'm just over the lip of the concrete. So all joist hangers are in place except for the ones that I'm missing over there. I'll pick those up in the big city today, this weekend. And when I come back out on Monday, finish those joist hangers
and be ready to put the decking down.
All right, my favorite part of deck building. I love when I've got all my material pre-cut, I've got all my material pre-crown checked and stacked in the area ready for install. I feel these make really good videos, and it feels like you're getting so much done because you've done so much work to get to this point. All my ends were so tight to the beam. All my joists flushed up perfectly to the top of the beams.
What a nice looking structure. All the joists are in. On my pile I had all the crowns up so I could just quickly flip them in. Got everything tight on both sides of the beam and just toe nailed in. I'll fill in the rest of the hanger nails when I've got some time. For now I'm gonna establish my chalk lines for my 3 rows of blocking and get that started.
Just going to take a quick second to explain why I love blocking so much. So how blocking works is that these joists, when you stand on one independently, it wants to sag down. But if you block it tight to the next one beside it, then it can't sag down because it's putting pressure against the one beside it. So when you finish blocking through a whole system like this, you make the floor so tight because there's no deflection in the joists because they are unable to deflect downward because they're pinched in tight to the side of the next one. So it really makes the strongest floor the more blocking that you add. In residential construction years ago when they did non-engineered floor joists, people did a lot of cross bracing. Cross bracing is the exact same, except they didn't use full blocking back then because they didn't want it to be in the way to run electrical and mechanical and stuff. So if I had electrical and mechanical going through this floor, I would have cross bracing. But because it's just a nice solid floor, this is perfect.
Well, that wraps us up for today pretty well. I got to get the joist hanger on in there before I can finish this row, or sorry, that row, and got to move that light before I can finish that row, and I'll probably add one in the corner after. But for today, I'm just going to finish off with using my squaring this blocking up now, and then firing the rest of the nails into each block. So pretty tedious. Get in there with my orange square, push down, square it up, shoot in, finish the row, skip to the other one. And then I'll be back to move that stuff, finish the blocking, and start the decking on this with Tiger Claw hidden fastener deck system. And I'm not too sure, I think we're gonna do a picture frame and a space down the center, creating 2 different bays. It's about 32 feet from that point to that point, so I think that'll be nice, and then there'll be no joints except for the border work that makes it look like you're supposed to have joints, so much cleaner look. Well, better get back at it. All right.
Wow, what a great structure. Stay tuned for next week where we cover composite decking and glass handrail. Thanks for watching. Happy DIY!